Welcome to the Answers for Elders radio show. Meet the trusted experts who will give you straight answers and will help guide you on the path of later life care. Now, here's your host, founder, caregiver, and CEO, Suzanne Newman.
And welcome back, everyone, to Answers for Elders Radio Network. And we are talking to Star Bradbury, the author of the most incredible, well-written book for family caregivers, honoring those family caregivers that are here in National Caregivers Month. And it's called Successfully Navigating Your Parents' Senior Years, available everywhere. And I cannot strongly recommend this book more than what I do. It is an amazing book. And, you know, we've talking in our last hour about conversations and communication. And, you know, one of the things I always tell people, Star, and welcome back to the show, is I always say, base a conversation with your loved one in respect. And so one of the things I always tell families is don't drop information on your parents. Say, you know, mom and dad, next week, you know, my brother and I, or the family, we'd like to come over to your house and sit with you and talk about your future situation and to respect your wishes. So in other words, we want to do right by you. And and we also want to make sure that there's a plan because we all work full-time jobs. We're all in this situation. So when you frame the scenario up front, but give them a chance to gel on the conversation of what their wishes are, rather than just because you're going to put them on the defensive. If you just say, Mom, you know, you're probably going to have to go to assisted living someday. And this is what I see happening a lot of times with families. And of course, mom's going to push back because it's scary. So understanding to have that mindfulness to wait and give them a week to kind of, you know, gel on the conversation of the things we're going to cover. And I strongly recommend something like that. What do you think about that?
Well, Suzanne, one of the things I point out that I base on my 25 years in senior living is I always thought, and this was one of the mistakes I made when I was younger, I always thought that your parents, of course, would be willing to sit down and talk to you, especially if they were in a crisis. And I found the opposite is true. Why? Because when you're in the middle of a crisis, you're usually making uneducated decisions. You're upset and you're fearful, just like you said. And so that is not the time to try to sit down and make a plan when you've already waited too long and there's a crisis. And then what happens? You have siblings arguing, they may not agree. Your parents are already worried and they don't want you to take control. There's a crisis and you start losing options. So
and there's no plan. Everybody has a different opinion of where mom's at and what dad's doing. And
it takes time to develop a plan. And so what I encourage, and I want your listeners to think about this, is again, it's not too early to sit down when your parents, even before they're retired at 65, have you thought about where you want to live? Start out with the softest questions. Like you said, you're not going to go in and say, what is your plan if you had a serious health event? Or what if one of you passed away? Do you really want to stay in this big house? No, you can't start with that. You have to develop the habit of a conversation long before the crisis, and then it will gradually unfold as you sit down and talk about a plan. In the book, I decided to include this imaginary family, the Spencers, so that you could read about these principles, foundational principles and guides that I list, but then kind of watch this family apply those principles, apply those step-by-step guides, so you can see how it might work for you. Now, every family is unique. One size does not fit all. You have to work at what are your resources? How strong is their support group? How available are you to be part of that support group?
Absolutely.
But that doesn't mean you can't help your parents build a support team, even if they're in another state.
And so, everybody fears the unknown. I don't care if you're 5 years old or 50 years old or 90 years old. You know, we don't know what's the next step, but especially they're going to cling on to something that's most familiar. And I think that's one of the things when you address in your book, which I read that chapter pretty thoroughly, about specifically how many seniors want to age in place, right?
Oh, it's 90%.
And the thing that's interesting, everybody in our industry wants them to stay independent as long as possible.
Yes.
Nobody's trying to push anybody into someplace else just for, for giggles, right? It's the
Correct.
fact that they, there's a scenario where the best situation we want as family members, the best situations for our loved ones. And I think it's like when you're talking about having those conversations up front, saying, we want you to be there, and they feel the insurance that is. But if you can't do that anymore, what's the plan?
Well, let's back up a little bit, because if 90% of all seniors want to age in place, and I don't think that's going to change, which I totally understand. It's your home, you love it. But do you know what I like to point out? Saying that you want to age in place is not a plan, it's a statement.
Right.
It's a wish. So in my many years of observing aging in place, I like to stress that's great, but now let's develop a plan so that you can age in place successfully. For example, let's say your parents are in a 3-story house. All the bedrooms and bathrooms are on the second floor.
Yeah.
Right. And you see that your parents are getting a little frailer, or maybe somebody's already had hip surgery. Do you really think that that's the greatest location to age in place? So you might say, I know you want to age in place, but you've still got this big house where we all grew up and all the kids are gone now. Can we talk about what decisions we might make, or what you really want? Maybe we should talk about remodeling so that there's a full bedroom or bathroom downstairs. Let's do that long before you need it if you want to stay in your house.
Or an elevator.
Right.
Yeah.
Instead, or do you want to consider downsizing and moving closer to me? Meaning, parents, I'll tell you something.
A condominium where you don't have the yard maintenance, you don't have the different things. There's so many different options and when you start planning in advance, there's many factors that you look at. If you have a spouse, you also have to think about how, if there's health issues with your loved one, with your spouse, early, guess what? You're going to still feel that, realizing that that's going to progress, right? So is that the best plan for you? And the worst plan is to do nothing. And that's what I always say. You have to understand that, aging, whether we want to age or not, we are going to. We are all going to get old unless something happens that we prematurely pass. And that's the thing that I think is so important, of making sure that we have these plans in place. You talk a lot about this, and you also talk a lot about having those conversations. And I think that's what's so important about what you provide. So,
well, one of the things I say, Suzanne, is that you can always say, I'm worried. You're not making it about them. You say, I'm worried because my best friend's just going through this with her parents, and I see how unprepared she is, or whatever the story is. And I don't want to be unprepared. So unless I know what you want and we talk about it, how can I support you in what you want? I'm not.
So the book is Successfully Navigating Your Parents' Years with Star Bradbury. And Star, you and I are going to be right back right after this. We at Answers for Elders thank you for listening. Did you know that you can discover hundreds of podcasts in our library on senior care? So visit our website and discover our decision guides that will help you also navigate decision making. Find us at answersforelders.com.